Julie here with Sirius Tellus Moon, and this is Jupiter, our Jupiter, with a midheaven, lot of Fortune 22 and midheaven 18ing. And I think it's a good time to talk about um, right before Uranus ingresses to Gemini. How do I feel about the AI taking over the intellectual um, jobs or businesses? And definitely, there was a phase of kind of, I think one could have felt a certain sort of decay when it comes to peopling on social media. Now, it's very fascinating because with Saturn Neptune, there is the thinning of the veil, and content creators basically enter the rubric of celebrities, which means that they had to fight off basically the Epstein ring or MK Ultra and MK often. Some had to fight off, and some maybe try to cope within those circles, um, which means they would have had to kill, they would have had to sacrifice, they would have had to rape, they would have had to murder. So, and and that is and then all finding out that all of that um, is not suffice with AI taking over everything, because I think that this is something that has existed in the business sector of any business. As a millennial, we had the weird privilege to not be so aware, um, because for us, we would grow up on the motivation quotes of celebrities or billionaires or whatnot. Um, and then we felt, there was a lot of motivation. So there's a lot of motivation for success, for innovation, for entrepreneurship, um, and and the belief that one can kind of like work hard and make it, or not even work as hard as before, because we also began to understand how rest is important, um, and now it feels that a lot of us have crossed a threshold, and it is the threshold to success. It's finding out what does it actually means to be in those echelons. Whoops, Epstein list out. So some of us had more ability to say, "Hey, I don't want that." Um, I think all of us were, to one degree or another, tortured. And certain people, maybe if they came from a lineage, or um, then they did not have the ability to speak about these. Maybe now, after the Epstein list is out, we're going to see some stuff. Um, for example, just a couple of months ago, I don't think I could challenge the notions of um, using drugs as castration on child sex offenders, where when we understand the extortion cult aspect, then not only we can more more openly speak about that, whether survivors of um, various from attempts to various degrees of molestation or trafficking or any sort of thing, and or as people that were in the physical rituals and they had to rape and as children and they had to murder as children. Now throw AI into all of that, it's kind of like, well, that's it, it's nice to be able to have a possibility to to put some details into a program and get a reading. um, and of course, this is harvesting of information. And I think that some of us millennials also grew into, yeah, the government knows everything about everybody, but like I'm just a civilian in a Googleplex civilian. Like, what the fuck do the government care about me? And then being basically at a situation where those things are actually used in various experimental ways, um, and the people that didn't share the information would have been um, completely cut off when the other techniques were used on them. Um, so AI taking over various professions that required whether it's certification or training or years of study. Um, on the one hand, it's like, oh, people are going to lose jobs. On the other hand, hey, running a community with ritual abuse is, to begin with, not sustainable. Okay, I think it's the same as what I say about colonialism. If people, if clan people, I don't know, hex each other constantly, traffic, do all kinds of weird things. Of course, there's going to be invasion. Of course, there's going to be war. Of course, there's going to be colonialism. And the same with the business community. If a business community acts in that particular way, then the colonialism is simply AI. Now, good things and bad things about AI. First of all, I think people should be aware that, let's say, if they put in an astrology if they put in an astrology chart or astrology data, and I don't think astrology programs are exempt from that. Um, that information is not, how should I say, what we put on the internet is there, but that information is also there from the birth certificates of people. Um, and um, at the same time, I think that accessing a reading um, for every common individual and being able to assess for oneself is important, is something that can create a better power equilibrium between the person seeking consultation and the person offering consultation. I have seen consultations, not astrological, but I have seen consultations gone wrong. I've seen abuse of, it's not even abuse of power um, because it's mind, the so-called abuser is mind controlled. So I like the fact that people are going to not have to rely on somebody that may have had to kill, that may have had to rape, that may have had to traffic, that may have had to target their clients um, in order to get a reading. I think that's a blessing. And I think in general, how should I say that? Um, if, for example, if a patient can have access to prevent serious, severe medical conditions, that means they would be in less risk of getting into hospital, which is very risky, even if there wasn't ritual abuse there. Yeah, it's kind of like, hey, that's a place where all the sick people come to share germs when their immune system is anyhow weak. Now, um, being able to access preventative medicine or being able to, I don't know, Google scan or whatever other program that is not castration wax related. Um, yeah, by the way, Buffett began to consider withdrawing his investments from the Gates Foundation. Some would say too little, too late. Um, but if he can withdraw his investments in anything classified project budget, namely MK Opt and MK Ultra, um, continuing on this positive shift in, um, particularly by the person that made it a point to understand what he's invested in and was invested in with Epstein. And he was invested with Epstein. So, um, and the gates are being litigated. That's why he withdrew. Netherlands public pension withdrew investment from Palantir, again, surveillance technology. Um, those are interesting things happening. One thing that is a point to think about is, um, will intellectualism function more like a Wikipedia in the future? And who will have the access to modify the AI algorithms? Because it works on flooding information, and that kind of reminds us of the JP Morgan times, um, that can lead to the Great Depression, but regarding coherent information found online. And yet, it ain't like the um, the lack of accessibility to correct information during COVID regarding um, epidemiology, it ain't like that was not the exact same thing as the big the big buffoons funneling wealth of information to create bubbles in every which way. And we'll have to, and there's nothing like Uranus and Gemini where we might think about the information market. Gemini is a great debate sign. Being in the information market. Another point to consider is that not all people are compatible for non-thinking jobs. I reached academia because I was no good sustaining a corrupted market sector that was not Gen Z friendly as a millennial. um, but not all people are competent at, let's say, plumbing or it's not a non-thinking job, but I mean it's not an intellectual job, and intellectuals to begin with were the people that were incompetent in doing daytime the daily tasks, let's say. I'm one of them, like that's from that perspective I speak. When would a family send a child to be a priest that would later become a philosopher? When they something is off with the child, what would you do with them? In the past, in the past, in the past. Because usually they would be like the business sector. They're going to have to work in the business sector. Of course, at the clergy, later they connected the business sector and so on and so forth. But um, but when we think about the philosophers, then it's kind of like, well, that child was a bit off. Well, they'll become, a priest or something. And what is that a bit off? It basically they won't wash their clothes on time. They won't clean the house on time. They're not so much into the monetary or the you know the business facet. Like they're not sustaining a job. I'm not talking about the moguls, okay? And so that child would be sent off to be a priest, which would be a philosopher, a thinker, and person that would definitely be a leader in the community. But oftentimes, not all of them would be able to tie their shoes. And I'm speaking as a thinking person whose mom still reminds her to, you know, to close the sandals because I don't want to fall. Now, these people are not going to have too much um, options in the simple, you know. On the other hand, Um, we had the glorification of the thinking professions, even though the actual thinking professions were constantly targeted. Because they no, here's the thing: there's something is off with the child. What do? You send him to be a priest or something, or to study, and then and then that child can think. Isn't it supposed to be an incompetent person that can't do stuff? What they can think. We don't need thinking people in academic institutions. It's bad for business. These are the kind of people that would look at World War and world peace, and they'll approach it like a physics question. They find solutions. Oh yeah, well, the intelligence epic fails are such because they rape people in training. They should stop raping people in training. That's to lower the frequency so that people would be subjugated to what? They're not subjugated to love that is actually loving. It's like everybody everybody loses with that mindset. So that they can be extortable and serve the people that have lowered the frequency. It kind of doesn't make sense. Um, but the good thing is that the people that weren't going to the thinking professions, not because they don't know how to think, but because the other things make them happy. I saw a YouTube channel of a person of a guy that really realized he loves to fix bikes, and he opened a business, and the business sustained, and he had good clients. I don't know if he had to murder children or something like that. Um, and um, and these people would how should I say that would not be glorified. That would, of course, because that can be an actual sustaining business. The Pluto Capricorns, a lot of them are going to these professions. They require hard work, but they also are a way to sustain. And for people that are hardworking ha- and can take responsibility, then that's something that's sustainable. Which of course was not desired, because if a person can do a job that is actually needed and sustain themselves, um, then they're not dependent on a corporation anymore, and they're going to require simplifying running a business. Now, if you can build a house with Adobe in, I don't know, $10,000, $11,000 tops, unless you're building a big mansion or a neighborhood, a little bit of lime wash, and you have co-housing or requiring doing crime for having a house or having a job becomes less and less. Um, it's kind of like, where in the past people had to get a piece of information, they would have to do this and to do that, and then they would get stuck with the heritage of what they had to do to get that information. And um, with AI, we would have, or with the internet, we would have, even what I'm looking at right now. And and then it became kind of weird because I remember a couple of years ago, I said, okay, I'm gonna take readings, but the payment won't be to me, it would be to the people that I learned astrology from online. The quiet, at war when they have on the radio, they would have the quiet wave, the quiet tone, for when they would wait for a siren. And I'm like, what? I took a break from academia because of something. I'm not gonna, but I do pay reverence to the people that I learned from and so on. So, because masses of people have to deal with those things, we're going to see more explosive stuff like this woman in the north of Israel that she opened a business, then she sees the usual bottle that they put there, which is basically with oil. And at that point, the business owner has to look for whom to pay the money and how much to pay, and they have to figure out who the person that they need to pay. She took that bottle to the city center. She said, enough with that protection. The entire city joined her on a protest. A lady. When a woman's fed up. The men were shaking. He was like, what's that dumb fuckery? Oh, it's not me. um, we're definitely going to see a lot of revolts, particularly on those issues. But also, people are going to think about a person loses their job. Okay, they lose their job, they become depressed. Yeah, pill costs blah 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 blah. The pill is because I'm depressed because I don't have money because, and then some, I don't know, maybe they have to sleep at the field. They sleep at the field and say, well, What is these teachings that somebody's, and then they Google something, and that thing calms you down. It calms you down. If you misidentify, you die. Also, the food at the workplace sometimes was toxic. What if I stack these stones up and then, after the rain, fill the space between the stones with mud? If it is just like a wall, and I put one sheet, it's a tent. It's a tent. I just did some to block the wind. I had no money to buy a tent. So, so that's something lovely about AI is that people will be able to access information that they would have to rape and traffic people to basically have a certification in, but because the factor of making money from that information is gone, then the information is accessible. There's some good information out there. And since most people won't be able to get like a jobby job, and yes, some people might try to have several jobs and several this and several that, but the desire to simplify bureaucracy and the lack of energy to deal with bureaucracy, or the lack of meaning to it, because it's gonna drive people to try and see if they can build an adobe house or something. um, and that simplified facet of life is going to be juxtaposed to be able to have intellectual leisure with AI, which I really welcome. In Gemini, people are going to be interested in technology, but the combination of what we got from Taurus, the simplification of things, is not gone. I can only, let's say, rent a flat in a place when I know that most of my food is anyway coming from the lawn or the park or the field. And the rest is going to save for an adobe house or something. People are going to be way more aware of how they can self sustain. And I think even the prerequisites for people that, let's say, I don't know, um, people that did crimes or whatnot, is gonna be, well, if you're acting like, if you're not doing these crimes here, or if you're not doing these crimes anymore, that's a non-issue. But that has to be. For example, if somebody steals food because they don't know how to forage, then they can learn how to forage. And then they don't have to steal food anymore. Because if, I don't know, half of their income was going to housing, and then they wouldn't have enough for food and so on. So it's kind of like, oh, they can learn how to forage, and then they can join an actually, I don't know, an actual good fish um, into the mix. And now they got money to buy food. But also, when they forage, they can relax and calm the nervous system. If we're going universal basic income, should have been no problem, which we are. That's the reset. Universal basic income is per individual. Until there is no abolition of entire pedo rings, there's no point to bring more children. And many people on the transition need to tend to their own inner child, so they cannot parent. People that were whose ego was very attached, to an intellectual position, I think those people are going to have kind of like an identity crisis. But because of the way society was running for any type of those things, basically they would already they would already have identity crisis. Um, we would still need to research and advance science if I think about, let's say, astrology. Think even about this site. Throughout the years, Peter brought more and more modules into the program that do not replace astrologers in that case. And I think the the studies part of the intellectual jobs is not going to be gone. It's not going to be gone completely. But we will be working with AI that can probably make a lot of things easier as well. It's not impossible that a lot more people, if I think about COVID was an entrepreneurship boom. And I think particularly the art related businesses, because it's going to be easier to launch a business than and even have an astrological election and releases upon astrological elections and the computation around that, then a lot of people that weren't oriented towards having their own business before, like artists, would be able to do so more easily. For example, I could not give an astrological reading if I had to computate by hand every chart. Even if I could, it would probably require more of me. And I would probably not think that I would become an astrologer, let's say. Simply because it would be learning a lot of mathematics that I probably would enjoy studying for the sake of it, whether I'm good or not at computation by hand, but I probably wouldn't trust myself to to computate a chart of a person in by hand, and then based off of the reading. But then who knows? Um, Definitely before there were Astro.com and AstroSeek, I would look at ephemeris and I would say, "Hi, I don't understand anything," and go pick a physics book. But afterwards, it's like, whoa, there's a lot of cool patterns that I can just open a chart and look and search, um, and it's way more available. So I think that when it comes to launching businesses on an optimum astrological election, particularly with Sedna and Gemini, it would allow people that weren't business inclined to be able to run business. And that means artists. Um, what about sales and marketing? I do think social media had segments where when the algorithm was working, then people were running businesses. And I think there are going to be a lot of tech rebellions to make the algorithm work. These things probably are going to be more open source, particularly after Uranus separates from the trine with Pluto. Um, they're not necessarily going there in the beginning because people that are in control don't like to lose control so much, but eventually they'll have to. It's kind of like when women began to work and have their own separate income and registry at the bank, and like folks had to get used to that. Um, Gemini reminds us that running a business is supposed to be um, more lighthearted. Probably we're going to have a lot of interactions. Probably, and here's the thing: the attempt at canceling the functions that allow people to optimize their products, that's going to create an uptick boom of tech selfpreneurs. Okay, think about when the internet started. Everybody learned a little bit of HTML and had a website. Okay, I had the weirdest design for my website. I liked it. Was in high school. It's kind of like, oh, they're gonna cancel the Optima. Da, 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 da. I'm gonna say, okay, what's the product? A printer. Fucking amazing. What does it do? Are you printing an artillery? Do you think you might be printing an artillery? If you're not printing an artillery, we probably can produce something. We don't have to patent it. What do you need? An Adobe house. Okay, that makes sense. We can optimize our printers for this particular product, and later each person can refine and redesign their own. I'm gonna break the market because I'm not gonna require you to cancel an optimization, but I will mainly define that I don't know that you cannot print a tank. Enough for me to define that you cannot print a tank if you're printing a house, and other than that, you can print a safety house. If we don't define it as a safety house, it's just a house. And then I don't ask you for payment for safety house. and we don't call it safety, we call it house, so we don't have to stand into any kind of, and you don't complain about to me about what you print, then we're pretty much good to go. If no children are murdered or sacrificed or ritually abused in that house. The latter is the most challenging thing. But here's the lovely part. Because it's going to be way more open source, anybody that would want to knock my business down, all they would need to show is that they broke into an estate and some children were trapped there. Now, let's say my business down. I got my Adobe house. Somebody else can start something, but here's the thing: if they knock all of them houses of people that use this unpatented patent, and basically every time somebody keeps children hostage, they basically break into and release the children, then we're beginning to have an open source code for safe housing. For that we need culture, and for that we need community. Trees and cults is not. And we need to optimize for the right to exit violence. More thoughts to do with AI and technology. Definitely more people will be comprising technology themselves just for the sake of it. In the beginning, there are going to be a lot of attempts to regulate, to control, and probably a lot of opportunities as well. Um, and people are going to, some people are going to go the JP Morgan way, some people are going to go other ways. A lot of things will be probably regulated by the Uranus trine Pluto. Saturn in Gemini will definitely bring regulation over technology, and but not everything. So if I think about the time I enjoyed to do astrology before the big AI boom, then that was a privileged optimum time to learn astrology, to look at the world from another point of view. And AI is a wonderful solution to the certification question or to the gatekeeping question. Oh, I won't be able to talk about astrology if I don't have certification of so and so and so and so and so. Well, listen, ChatGPT. Got a secret? Can you keep it? Uh-uh. Got a secret? Can you leak it? So, and well, astrologers were mainly worried about regulation during Saturn in Pisces. Um, but now, with all the AI stuff and the good thing about celebrity culture being diffused. First of all, I see already celebrities. Rihanna had a new album, and I think she also used a combination of AI, giving her way more control over her creation than before. So just think about it. If you wanted to record a video, first of all, with MTV in particular, everybody suddenly had to have a video. And it became less and less profitable. They were fascinating works of art, but a set is a set. And suddenly the thought of being able to execute an artwork with AI, it's kind of like, hey, the studio wants you to murder this, rape this, traffic this, and then you get to launch your own. You can, and then you get to decide on your own artistic design of your album. And when suddenly an artist can go Mariah Carey on Tommy Mottola, and they can literally create an album infusing themselves and AI. But not only that, people that weren't able to um, make music before with AI were going to be able to do way more. People that wrote lyrics but didn't know how to sing. Usually they'll just be plagiarized and copied and lyrics stolen and so on. Now they can have an AI that can actually execute a music and a song from their lyrics. They say, oh, but it violates somebody else's rights. They were the people whose rights were violated. Lyricists were the screenwriters of the music industry. Of course, that depended on the benevolence of the team that would use the song. Um, movie, filmmaking, animation. Now, if you think about animation movies as the open source of coding, it begins to make more ethical sense because everybody contributes to the system and benefits from the system. Now, astrology can work in the same way. And but if they try to